welcome to the latest Moviescramble podcast, in which we will quite literally be getting under the skin of Coralie Farjah's The Substance. Joining me today is a man who surely has a portrait aging horribly somewhere. It's the ever-luminous John. How are you?
Well, I wouldn't know so much about the portrait, but I probably look as if something's come out of my back at some point. And my soul is no longer in my body, I think. But apart from that, yeah, I'm very well, thank you very much. It's just the usual nice wee Sunday, and it's getting dark. It's horrible, isn't it? It's starting to get really dark really early now and everything, but such is the way of things. That's how we are. So how are you?
Yeah, really good. Glad to be back and chatting to you about all things film. We've obviously had a wee break in our recordings. Not that anyone would know, because there's still lots of content coming out, which is the good thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, of course.
So today, as I said, we're talking about The Substance, which is a film that takes our obsession with youth and the body beautiful to extreme levels. Demi Moore stars as Elizabeth Sparkle, a fading film and TV star who's told her career is over simply because she has dared to reach 50. She learns of a new substance, one that will span a younger, more beautiful version of herself, and decides to try it in a bid to resurrect her career. But this new version of her, called Sue and played by Margaret Qualley, seems to be going rogue with the strict rules that the substance requires, resulting in a grotesque body horror that is sure to stick in your mind long after the credits roll. So, John, have you seen any of Coralie Farjah's previous work, and did this temper your expectations for the film?
I always bang on about this because I've managed to get abroad and watch some films at the Sitges Film Festival, but I saw Revenge at Sitges, I think it was 2017, 2018, with an audience in the big auditorium. It was like about 1,500 people in there, and it was a fantastic experience. It was really good. It's quite a visceral film itself, which I think you've seen it, haven't you? Yeah. So
yeah, I have. Yeah.
I had no knowledge of the director prior to that. I believe it was just a short film that she had in her resume before that, Reality Plus, I think it was called, which I hadn't seen. So I went into this completely blind. I hadn't seen any trailers, and I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic film. It was so well made, and the great story, and just sort of the right level of over the top gore for me. So expectations were reasonably high going into this film because of her previous work. I was a wee bit wary because obviously it's a much bigger film in terms of the production values. I mean, the previous one had 6 actors in it in total, whereas this one has three very big name actors in this, and it's obviously a bigger production, and it's American set as well, so it was kind of like could go either way here, but yeah, it completely lived up to expectations for me. I just thought this was absolutely fantastic. So there we go. Thanks very much, everybody. See you later. Don't need to say anymore.
Yeah, that's it. Do you know, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. It was only when you said it was the same director as Revenge that I realised. I mean, to be honest with you, my expectations were kind of high going in, because it had obviously done a wee tour in the festival circuit, and it was like people were vomiting in the aisles and walking out and fainting and all that. And you do sort of buy into all that hype. So,
of course.
And obviously a good cast, as you say. So, I mean, on that note, why not just dive straight into performance? We've got Demi Moore in a very different but very demanding lead role. What did you think of her performance?
She was a bit of a revelation. Now, it shouldn't really be a surprise because it shouldn't be a surprise because she's a very good actor. But you tend to forget how good actors are because of some of the roles that they've played previously and their sort of career progression. With Demi Moore, she had like a sort of high point in the 80s and the 90s. She was a big name. She was above the line for a lot of films.
Oh, yeah.
And then she just kind of disappeared almost. And that's unkind to say that. In that disappearance, she was obviously still working and everything, but it wasn't as high profile and everything. So you tend to dismiss actors, and especially female actors, if they have been really sort of big and popular and say, well, it was because of their looks, or it was because of the time, or the salaciousness of the roles they were taking on. And all that does is sort of denigrates the performance they actually put in and the work they put in. And in order to, because people tend to think that they actually are those people then, because of this sort of like what was the Robert Redford film she was on with Woody Harrelson, where it was $1 million where to sleep with.
Proposal?
Yes. So, you know, there was that sort of performance, and that kind of informed a lot of people, or not correctly, but informed people of what she was like as a person, what she, you know, what her range was. And if your range is getting limited in that, you kind of, you don't expect very much. But here, it's totally balls to the wall. It's just a fantastic performance from start to finish. She conveys a 50-year-old actor really, really well. And the troubles that she has in her life. And it's an amazing performance. And it gets better throughout the film. It starts off really powerfully, but as the story demands, it changes as well. And it's just, I was so impressed by it. It's one of these sort of career high performances that actors would like give their right leg to be able to get. But I mean, we always bang on about how stupid it is calling a performance brave, but in terms of possibly ending your career, then it's reasonably risky doing something like this, and you've got to applaud her for it, because I thought it was really, really good.
Well, I think that in a way, I mean, I obviously don't know, and I haven't really watched any interviews with her, but it must have felt quite vulnerable, because this surely must have felt a little bit on the nose for her as an actress. You know, she's somebody who even recently has had extreme press scrutiny over the way that she looked. She modelled in a catwalk show and everyone was like, her face is sunken in, what she done to herself, blah, 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 blah. So there is probably more than a hint of, you know, she can take her own personal experience to this role. And I think that for all that, obviously this is a film that is very over the top, as you've said, but for me, the best part of this film was the scene before she's going out to meet an old school friend, and she tries on a dress and she tries on some makeup, and then she's over, you know, she's every single pore in her face, she's absolutely looking over in the mirror, and she's pulling her eyebrows up, and the lipstick goes on, then the lipstick comes off, and the mascara and all this, and she's trying to look younger. And then she just kind of, in a fit of rage, sort of scrubs all the makeup sort of all together, and it sort of leaves this kind of puddle in her face. And I thought that was, you know, in a film of such bombast, that little moment I thought was so realistic. You know, because we've all gone to leave the house 15 times and not liked, you know, the skirt that we were wearing, or the shoes didn't feel comfortable, or we thought our makeup looked stupid. And that moment I thought was so relatable in a film that's obviously not very relatable for other reasons, because it's just so ridiculous. But that little moment I thought was really personal. And obviously she's up against, you know, Margaret Qualley, who's playing Sue, the younger version of herself. And then you've got Dennis Quaid as this odious television executive who's called Harvey, appropriately enough. What did you think of their performances? Because obviously they're doing a very different thing to what Demi Moore is doing in this film.
Yeah, well, Dennis Quaid is fantastic in this. He's just given free rein. I think he's just been told, just be as horrible as possible. What can you do to make yourself bigger than you actually are? And he just totally goes for it, from eating with his mouth open.
Oh, that was awful. Awful.
to the way that he slobbers over Sue, and the way he dismisses like Elizabeth. It's just it was just this horrible sleazy guy, and it is almost like a caricature of executives you've seen on film before. These sort of, they're in charge of a certain amount, but they're not the main man. He obviously reports to other people, as we see later on in the film, because he's surrounded by all the executives that are higher up than him, and he's been a odious little toad at that point, so he's not the sort of the alpha male in that sort of situation. But yeah, he was horrible, and it was really effective, because it showed the sort of extreme version of what must go on at all times, especially towards women performers, and their lack of longevity in sort of mainstream television and films unless they actually have a stake in the making of said programs and everything as well. Margaret Qualley was really, really good as well. I mean, there was not a bad performance in this film, and it would be difficult to be overly critical of performances, but she was an entirely different. She was supposed to be this progeny that came out of Elizabeth, but yet she had her own motivations. She was her own person. What you would think in this situation is that she would be exactly the same, but what you don't take into consideration is the fact that people change over time. I mean, the person that I was at 25 or 30 is not the same person I am now.
At 31.
Because no. Thank you very much, darling. No, but your life experience changes you, and just the aging process changes you as well, because you walk in a different way. Almost, and everything about you is different because there's decades worth of change and experience in there. So it wouldn't be the same person. And the filmmakers obviously got that really right, because she is a bit like her. You could see that she was kind of like a younger version of Elizabeth, but she had her own motivations. She had her own style about her, and she was reacting to the current situation rather than a situation which was 20 years before, where Elizabeth was that age. So it was very kind of nuanced, but I thought it was really sort of on the nose, yes, but it was kind of spot on as well. It really kind of hit home about the differences between the sort of two main characters without it clashing. It gave enough space for both of those performances to happen. Now, obviously, there was space because they weren't really on screen together. Well, one of them may have been lying on the floor in a puddle of something at the time, but you know what I mean. Most of the time, when they were the focus of the drama, it was just them on screen. So yes, I thought it worked particularly well, and it was a balance that was really difficult to get, I would imagine, but I think they pulled it off.
Yeah, I think Qualley's character is really interesting because at first she's this sort of like almost kind of dream girl ingenue, because she's just like fresh out the wrapper, as it were. But then very quickly she's somebody who becomes aware of the power of her own beauty. Essentially, she knows how to manipulate situations. But then in contrast, you've got, honestly, this line in this film has stayed with me for weeks. Dennis Quaid turning around to her and saying, "Pretty girls should always be smiling." I actually wanted to rip the cinema screen down with my bare hands at that. He is, and I said this in the review, he is the most disgusting thing in the film for me. Forget all the blood and guts and all the rest of it. He is vile. But I thought that, they are all given so much to do. It's a very generous film, I think, in terms of its writing, and that no character is sort of left sort of unfulfilled or sort of unfleshed out. But what I do want to talk about is colour palette, because it's insane. Like even the colour is like ratcheted up like 1,000,000 degrees. You have these extremely bright yellows and pillar box red and Barbie pinks and all this sort of thing. How do you feel the intensity of the colour palette? And of course, the substance itself is this disgusting sort of lurid green colour.
Yeah.
It adds to this kind of sense. It's all very operatic, isn't it? It's all very over the top.
Oh yeah, well that's the whole point of the film itself. It is an over-the-top film, and it's about people who are over the top. They're performers, darling. That's the two main characters are actors. They're playing actors, and obviously Dennis Quaid is like I've said before, the bombastic executive in it as well. So yes, it is kind of larger than life. So yes, you will get this reflected in the way that they actually show the color palette. But there was kind of subtle differences in the way that they actually did the color palette, and they did it with other various aspects of the film as well, in that it was different for Elizabeth than it was for Sue. Sue was very bright, brash, totally. But with Elizabeth, it was slightly more muted in the way that they did it. The sky wasn't quite as blue. Every time you see Elizabeth walking along the street, it's this brilliant azure blue sky, not a cloud in sight or anything. But with Elizabeth, it was slightly different. It was slightly darker. It was slightly damper in terms of the way that they actually portrayed that, and that helps with the understanding of the problems that the characters are actually going through as well. That's what I kind of took from it. So yeah.
No, I totally get that. And for me, it was like she was wearing this bright yellow coat, almost sort of like, please notice me because I'm still, this star, this quite literal sort of star walking around in the yellow coat, but it just wasn't quite, she wasn't turning heads the way that, obviously we get these very gratuitous close-ups of Sue in her sort of, tight leotards and all the rest of it, but we don't really get that with Elizabeth in the same way. The sound design, obviously, as well, is also absolutely incredible. I mean, I've never heard so many squelches in my entire life. And in particular, like, as you said, the way that Dennis Quaid eats his lunch, if you have, like, that sort of phobia where people chew with their mouth open, this is definitely not the film for you. But how did, again, a very over-the-top, very deliberate choice in the way the sound design is put together. How did that sort of impact your viewing experience? Because I feel like I've genuinely never heard sound like it.
It really complemented the visuals, because if you have extreme visuals, the only way it could have had any more impact would be to have no sound whatsoever in some of the scenes where there was particularly graphic body imagery. And if you had nothing in there, and you just had the sound of whatever was going on, then that may be a little more disturbing, and you may not sleep for a wee while because of that. But it's all electronic sounds. It's all fake. So it's not real sounds. It's not generated by an instrument. It's a synthesizer. It's been processed. It's in the same way. It's kind of like some of the music and the sounds from All Quiet on the Western Front. There's these sort of deep blasts that you get. So, and it's all this and things like this. It just comes in, and it really emphasizes certain elements, and it's done very well. Obviously, it's been put together in such a way that it complements everything. And I was actually listening to it this morning. Now, it doesn't work so well in terms of just as a listening experience with nothing else going on. It is, like, say, squelchy and honky and stuff. But if you've seen the film, then it brings up these images in your mind, which is either very good because it's a good sort of reminder of what's going on, or it can be quite disturbing as well at the same time.
Yeah, quite disturbing is probably the general vibe of the film. Because even as we were going into the film, I went to go and get like a juice or whatever, and as I said to you, I was like, I'm not getting food. And the guy behind the counter went, "Oh, what film are you going to see?" And I said, "The Substance," and he went, "Yeah, don't get food." He was like, "You're going to be left with a knot in your stomach the entire time." And I definitely think that's you just know going into it, obviously, if you know roughly what it's about, you just know that it's not going to be this sort of lighthearted take on, oh, look how sweet and, rosy everything is in Hollywood. It's a very sort of like clawing feeling it, something is going to go wrong here, and you're just not sure what. And obviously, this is a body horror. The sort of kind of practical effects, the prosthesis, they're a big part of the film, but they're done in a really sort of slow burn. It's not like you get this immediate burst of like, blood and guts, although there is kind of initially. But I mean, in terms of Elizabeth's sort of transformation, is that what you would expect them to do? Or did you expect a more sort of like kind of slasher type, obviously we do see Elizabeth literally give birth to Sue. In terms of Elizabeth's transformation, how did you feel that was paced?
It was done really well. There was enough world building in it, because you didn't actually see anything horrible. There's no other way to put it. Some of the images on screen were horrible, but you didn't see anything like that for, it was about 30 minutes or something. There was a good long build up, which established the characters more than anything else and their sort of circumstances, and laid the sort of groundwork for the rest of the film. I think it's about 2 hours long, the film. So it was deliberate. It was never boring, and it just kind of kind of unsettled you in a way that it prepared you for what you were going to see. So when it did actually happen, didn't expect it to happen in the way that it did. Now, if I'd actually looked at the poster beforehand, then I'd have probably had a good idea because of the poster itself, which is a nice departure from usual sort of horror posters in that it's not red and black.
Yes.
So it's this bright white poster with Demi Moore with her back to the picture, and you see the staples on her back. Now, I would never have thought that they would have done that for a single set. Now, the way that it's kind of been put together, I kind of should have thought about it, but I didn't know how they were going to do it. And when they did it, it was a real surprise, the birthing scene for me. Because if you think about birthing, there's an obvious way that a woman can give birth, you know?
Not out of her spine.
Yeah. Foo up in the air, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, out of the back was a new one.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that was.
And I wonder that must represent something. I feel like there's something in there that there will be a reason why that has been chosen as the method of delivery. I'm just not sure what, but I think that, yeah, as you say, there's like 30 or 40 minutes or so before we dive into the proper, you know, sort of body horror of it all. And I think that even that is just so well paced, because it's not like, you know, she immediately gets this double and all of a sudden, you know, she's this sort of like wizened crone. There's a very deliberate sort of choice to not have her sort of fade away immediately. And even that, like, I thought that there was some commentary on, like, for example, you know, we see Elizabeth sort of sitting at home alone and she's just watching sort of like telly shopping, and she starts to kind of gorge herself in food. And to me, there was like almost a kind of comment on how lonely it is to get older, because nobody is paying attention to it anymore, and she is a kind of has been in terms of the industry. And so she's got this beautiful big apartment looking out on this, you know, incredibly vibrant city with all these things going on, but she's just not part of that anymore.
Yeah, and there's nothing
older
in the apartment as well. The apartment is sparse, so people don't come over. She's on her own. She's got one chair.
Yeah.
One chair in the television, and obviously she's got various other wee bits, but there's nothing there for entertaining others or anything like that. It's very, very much a solitary existence, but in a reasonably large space as well. So yes, that all pulls all that together. The fact that she's known right across the country, but she doesn't really have friends as such. It's just people that she works with or people she knows through work. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's very well, and it's very subtle that the way they do these things as well. They don't make it a point. They let you discover for yourself these elements about the main character without spelling it out, without her having a conversation saying, you know, I'm all alone here or anything, because some films would have done that, you know. I don't have any friends, that kind of idea. I go back to an empty apartment every night. But no, they don't do that. They visualize it rather than just spoon feeding it to you. So yes.
And I think the visuals are so important. Now, obviously, the most on the nose one is how the film opens, which is her star on the Walk of Fame, which becomes sort of cracked and dirty before eventually somebody slobs some hamburger or whatever it is all over it, and it's left looking like a bloody mess, which obviously is a big sort of pointer to where this film's going. But visually, you know, was there anything that sort of stood out to you in terms of, you know, that was kind of one of the sort of most striking images of the film, or did you just like the way that it was sort of put together for the eye anyway?
There was an emphasis on where the camera was, depending on who you were actually focusing on. So when it was Elizabeth, the camera was at head height for most of the time, especially when she was out wearing her big yellow coat and everything. So you would see her from there, and it was often shot from behind as well.
Yeah.
So the camera was almost like solicitously following her and almost intruding in her, like almost like stalking on her. But when you see Sue, when her shots, when she was doing exactly the same actions, the camera was shot from below and it was pointed up, and there was a certain, like I say, there was more colour to it as well, and it was more sort of lingering as well. It was almost like a wee bit seedy the way that they did that. So that was a fairly obvious one. But even the way that they shot their shows now, we haven't mentioned this. Sue and Elizabeth both have television shows now. The whole plot, the whole reason behind the plot of this, like you said, was she's turned 50. She does this aerobics show, Sparkle. Sparkle with Elizabeth, it's called, which sounds really old-fashioned. That's her name even sounds old-fashioned. The way that she's presented on screen, it's almost like this sort of Jane Fonda type.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
So you've got like leg warmers, you've got like even with when she's wearing her leotard, which is cut down, so there is a cleavage there, but it's not much. It's quite presentable, and there's a belt actually on the leotard as well. It's all kind of a wee bit old-fashioned and stuff, but then when you see Sue, and she's got this sort of electric pink outfit which clings to every part of her body, and the way that that's filmed and presented on television compared to the way that Sparkle with Elizabeth was, it Pump It Up with Sue, even the name of it, So it's emphasizing the difference between the different ages and the audience that these TV shows are trying to attract by using sex, whereas Sparkle with Elizabeth is more sort of cozy and it's aimed at
gentle.
An older audience. It was different. So there was all that kind of working, and that all worked in the frame of how they shot certain elements of it. Other than that, when they shot all the body horror stuff, they all shot it sort of mid-shot. So you just, it wasn't zooming in and all that. It was just left to, basically expand. And it didn't pull away, so you weren't getting lots of different cuts. They would linger on things, and it was just, and that just made it worse for the audience, because you were kind of going, right, we've kind of seen this now.
Pan out the window now.
Yeah. Which they tended not to do.
No, they absolutely didn't. I think it's you're spot on. As I was watching it, I was thinking, Sue is shot basically like through the male gaze. Every time I felt like uncomfortable, like lingering across, Sue's body, but that's obviously the way she was being perceived by like the Dennis Quaid character. What the workout thing did make me think of is, do you remember that Eric Prydz remix for Call on Me? And it was that sort of like almost intimidating how sexually aggressive it is, and it's meant to be a workout, but you're getting close-ups of somebody's like groin as they're thrusting into a camera and stuff like that. So I thought it was really well done from that perspective. I also really loved just the sort of picture frame window that Elizabeth has. We're getting this, as I say, this view out on this really vibrant city that she just feels like she's no longer part of. And then I did like the sort of Dorian Gray aspect of the huge portrait she had in her living room, which was obviously her at her peak, which she got very angry at, because I think it is a really angry film. Like, there's a real violence towards aging itself, because obviously aging is a violence upon the body in itself, but there is a real anger, I think, that's really... Did that strike you as well? This felt like a sort of... This is a film that's got something to say, but it's doing it with a clenched fist kind of thing.
Yeah, it's anger and frustration, isn't it? Because no matter what you do, you don't have full control over the aging process. Now, this substance gives you the chance to have, or in theory, have more control, because it says you are in control here. You are the one. So it's all based around you. And the fact is, and we haven't mentioned this obviously when we're talking about it, but they have to swap places every 7 days. So you get Sue for 7, and then in theory you get Elizabeth for 7, and it's how they work with each other, because when Sue is out, she is basically taking the essence from Elizabeth, and that's all part of the plan. That's not her being basically a horrible person about it. This is all part of what they have to do for the substance. Basically, there's a feeding tube goes in to Elizabeth in order to keep her alive, and she's taking this substance out for 7 days, and then they reverse it, and they do the same the other way around. Or do they do the same? Does she take the essence of the younger one as well? I'm not sure if she does.
No, I think she just
No, it's
exists.
just the one. Yeah. So
Yeah.
but it's emphasizing the fact that she is the copy. She's not the primary in this. So yes, it kind of it does all that. But yes, as the film gets on, Elizabeth gets angrier and angrier, and everything around her is angry. Even Sue gets angry as well because of the situation she's in. It's not a situation that she chose to be in. She was created. So that kind of runs through it as well. And it's the anger and frustration between the two of them. They end up hating each other because of this, whereas it's like hating yourself, I feel like.
Yeah.
And they both moan and complain to the creators of this. They always phone them up and say, but she did this and she did that. There's all that going on as well. So yeah, there's very little nicety in this film.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, as I say, it's a kind of a rage against the sort of aging process as well. You know, when we first meet Elizabeth, she's quite rightfully seething because she's been told by this absolute fucking mess of a man in his cheap and his, you know, whatever, that, you know, after 50 it all stops.
Yes.
And she is like, what? Because, and again, you know, this all comes back to, you know, real life. You have men on television with grey hair, you have men on television with sort of unusual facial features, you have men on television who are overweight. You just do not get that with women. Women are not allowed to age in the same way. This has always been the case. And I think that this film really sort of leans into and absolutely digs its heels into this notion that, you know, it is a violence upon women, that they are not allowed to age in the same way. And then in turn, they sort of, these two characters, Elizabeth and Sue, sort of become violent towards each other because, you know, Elizabeth, for all that she wanted this younger version of herself, every time she sees Sue's posted everywhere, she starts doing that really kind of high-pitched sort of mimicky voice, like, oh, it's all perfect and all this sort of thing. And so she hates the fact that this younger version of herself has become a success, because obviously that's success that she once had. And then I love the scenes where Sue woke up and realised that Elizabeth had sort of gorged herself on like buttery, greasy foods, and she was absolutely fuming that, you know, she had dared to do that because she's got a body to maintain. So I think it's not subtle. It's not a subtle film in any way, and this messaging isn't subtle either. But I think it's a message that more people need to hear, and that's why it does make me sad that it's not a film that's going to, you know, fill a big 200-seater cinema, because it does have something kind of important to say. And on that note, as I say, we've said it's kind of like operatic in its sort of tone and style. How did that work for you? Because I feel like it does build to this bonkers finale, which we'll not go into, but it does become absolutely crazy at one point. Did that take away from its sort of believability, or sort of did you lose sympathy for any of the characters because it did become kind of ridiculous in a way?
No, it didn't take away from it. Basically, well, partly because, like we said before, I've seen Revenge, and the third act in Revenge is very over the top and not based on reality, I would say. Now, this third act here is probably about 3 times worse in terms of the amount of gore and blood and everything. It didn't take away from it because it's almost like taking something to its natural conclusion, but then taking it that one step further for the benefit of the film, rather than if this was real life, it wouldn't have happened. Obviously, it's not real life anyway, because you're talking about a substance. But yes, the themes that are being sort of put across are very real, like you said, about people getting older, especially women getting older, and not getting taken as seriously, getting discarded because of the fact that they've got grey hair, they may have a moustache, that kind of thing. So, you know, so yes, that's all relevant, but the third act just took it to that extreme, and I thought that worked because there was the whole body horror thing running through it from minute 35 or whatever, so you got that. So it was just taking that to that natural extreme, and it introduced it well, because it didn't just happen with this almost monstrous ending. It built it up in such a way that you understood how they got from being completely normal to being whatever they turned out to be. And that way you knew why it actually got to there. And it was plausible in the framework of the story, because There were warnings given from the very start when she got it said, here's your package.
The instructions were super clear.
Here are the rules. Do this,
and
it will be fine. And that was it. So if you don't follow it, so they set the rules, they did all the nice wee world building, and then they said, right, off you go, and basically fuck this up royally, because that's what's going to make this story, and that's exactly what they did. So it didn't surprise me. It did surprise me with the extremes that it went to.
Yes.
But I think it kind of earned that with the build-up. I really do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And also for me, it just left me puzzling, because we do meet another character who has used the substance.
Mm-hmm.
So there's at the start of the film, Demi Moore's Elizabeth Sparkle's in a car crash, and it's one of the sort of junior doctors that's attending to her that suggests that she would be a prime candidate for this substance, because he's obviously using it himself. And we do meet the older version of him in a diner when Elizabeth's kind of having a bit of a breakdown. And it did make me wonder how many other people out there, given that it's Hollywood and you know what it's like, if they say, oh, bull sperm is great for your face, suddenly everybody's going to get bull sperm facials. So how many other people? Because when you see the room that Elizabeth goes to pick up her substance in, there's a lot of mailboxes in there. So who else is walking about, with this version of themselves out there in the world?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You take that, and you really do have to sort of take that into consideration. Like, this isn't the first time it's been done. You kind of get that impression that it's not just by the fact that somebody else is recommending it. But yes, how widespread is it? How far does it go? And the fact that when they go to pick up the stuff, it's in this, like, the shutter doesn't come up properly in this wee place, and it's in a wee back alley and stuff like that. And it's all very cloak and dagger, if you like, the whole thing about it. So yes, I thought, that there is a bigger story that could be told here. Whether you'd want to see it, because you would be kind of repeating some of the substance of the film as well. Oh, there I go.
Yeah.
So there would be a kind of repeat there. So would you really want to? But it's nice to know that there's a larger story.
Out there, yeah. Because I mean, to me, it was like almost like sort of like buying dodgy pills off the internet. The minute she got to that area, which was like this dump of a place, and as you say, the shutter doesn't go up properly, but then all of a sudden she's in this like gleaming white sort of tiled area to go and pick up her substance. But then I was like, as soon as I saw the color of it, I was like, don't put that into your body. That's insane. Don't do that. But obviously that is the whole story. Would you take the substance yourself?
No, I don't think so. I don't have any issues with my back being completely intact. The fact that, see, when she is actually birthed, when Sue is birthed, and she has to put Elizabeth back together, and it's the staples she used, these massive big staples, and you're thinking, my God, there's nothing subtle about the way that is done at all. So I don't think I would really be up for that at all. And let's face it, the world couldn't handle a younger, more handsome version of me. So it's difficult to the first time around.
Yeah, I'm so glad we have that recorded so that we can. That to me, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about Margaret Qualley walking down like Sunset Boulevard turning heads. There would be absolute riots on her hands if young John came back to fruition.
Yeah, I may need to shave my legs before putting on my hot pink leotard, but swings and roundabouts.
Is there anything else you want to touch on in the substance? I think we've done a quite good deep dive on that.
Yeah, it was just maybe the fact that there was like sort of the bathroom scenes, and you touched on it there when she went to pick up the kit as well.
The sterility of those.
Yeah, it's these gleaming white antiseptic environments. Now, in order to counteract that, Sue actually does a bit of construction work and opens up.
She certainly does, yeah.
Opens up another area behind there that she can hide Elizabeth's body for the week, and it's in total darkness. So there's obviously the contrast, the black and white contrast. And I was really kind of taken with that as well. And the fact that it is such a sterile environment that meant if you saw anything, like you would see Elizabeth lying on the ground with bits of her hanging out. It just made for such a contrast.
Yeah.
As well, and it was really stark, and it really kind of brought home to you what it was kind of all about. And also the fact that Demi Moore was prepared to basically appear completely naked in this film, but not in a very sort of a, sexy older woman kind of way. It was really just, here I am kind of idea. And that kind of fits with the fact that she is lying on this floor in the bathroom, and they don't hide it at all. They just, it's full focus, but it's not done in such a way as it's like titillating in any way. It's just, this is a person with a body,
It's unflattering. She's getting dragged around the apartment by Sue, like literally by the ankles, up and downstairs and things like that. Is I definitely think, the stark white, I think as well, again, the sound design was used really well there as well, because obviously you've got a bathroom, for example, full of porcelain. So when she hits the deck, there was this, an unmistakable sound of somebody's head cracking off the tiles and things like that. So I think it is, at any time you saw that sort of bright white, you knew that it was going to be very, very substance focused in that moment, because either she was going to the pickup point or she was doing a body swap again.
What do you think of the influences in the film? There was a few pointers at various places towards other films and filmmakers. Did you pick up on them at all, or was it just more subtle for you?
I think for me, there's the kind of funny thing of like Death Becomes Her. I was thinking about that during the film as well, and I was obviously thinking about Dorian Gray. You can't get away from the fact that she's got a massive portrait. But apart from that, I thought they were the most kind of obvious steering points. But I guess maybe you've picked up on something a lot more.
Well, the Dennis Quaid executive was very, like, from it wouldn't be out of place in Blue Velvet.
Oh, of course. Do you know, funny enough, even the way he was shot with that kind of weird sort of warped lens on his face. Yeah.
And there was a few sort of Lynchian sort of moments as well. Just, it's quite subtle in the way that like certain things were filmed and all that. The studio where they were actually doing the work, the recording studios, there was a long corridor in that.
Oh, that was the shining carpet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, with a lot of the body horror things, you're thinking about David and Brandon Cronenberg as well, because it did take some inspiration from their previous films as well. So there was things like that in there. But yes, I kind of think that's where I was kind of going with that, rather than Death Becomes Her. But that's a really good shout, actually.
I kept thinking about that. As I say, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about Jane Fonda's exercise videos, Eric Price. There was a whole bunch of strange things going on in my head while I was watching it. But it's so well put together, though. I don't think it's, I mean, apart from, now that you've said that, the Shining carpet, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that's the carpet from The Shining. But I don't think anything else is quite as on the nose. Is that's, I would say, the most obvious sort of visual reference.
Yeah. Will you ever eat a chicken drumstick again? No, that's the.
Do you know? Can I just say, question. I don't eat meat on the bone because it freaks me out. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian. I obviously eat meat, but there's something about still having the bones in the animal that really makes me feel quite nauseous. It does make you very conscious that you're eating something that was once sentient. So, no, chicken drumsticks and prawns. Quite honestly, having seen Dennis Quaid decapitate and suck the juice out of him. It made me feel quite nauseous about prawns, if I'm being honest. Yes, so not one for the faint-hearted. And as I say, if you've got misophonia, definitely this film is going to absolutely trigger that, because it's just, the sound is so intense. So, John, I take it you would recommend this film. It's a shame that it's not getting as wide a screening as we'd like.
Yes, it's in strong competition for Film of the Year, I think.
That's what I think.
Yeah. So you're of a similar opinion then, yeah? Yeah,
very, very brash and, so as I say, sort of operatic, but delivering a message that I think more than a few people could use. I just think it's so well put together, and just really, the performances. I'm still thinking about it, and I saw it over a week ago, so I think that's a sign of a good film.
So definitely, yeah.
So obviously Demi Moore's character in this, or rather Demi Moore herself, has taken a role that feels quite left field compared to perhaps her previous roles. You know, she was sort of known as this 80s, 90s pin-up, you know, the rom-com, the strong woman. So we thought we'd follow on this discussion by talking about other older actors who have taken sort of left field roles later on in their career. So John, do you want to kick us off? I know you've quite a strong list of characters that you think are relevant.
Yep, sure. My first pick for this is a reasonably obvious one as far as I'm concerned. It may not be for most people, but it is Charlton Heston with Planet of the Apes from 1968. Now, Heston and one of the other people I'll talk about later on followed a sort of similar trajectory in that they came through with when the Hollywood system was kind of at its peak in the 40s and 50s. He was a major star, lots of big, but I mean, he played Moses, for goodness sake, you know, so, you know, there's only one above that you can actually play. So he was a massive star in the 50s, but as with most careers in acting, unless you're Tom Cruise, then you have a certain down period, mind you, Tom Cruise. So I'll cut that bit out, by the way, because I know one of yours is Tom Cruise.
Oh no, I went for a different list in the end.
Did you? Okay,
all right, I went for a different list in the end. Yeah.
Sorry, when we discussed this previously, Mary had suggested that Tom Cruise was going to be one of hers, and I could kind of get with that, and then I just realised as soon as the words came out of my mouth. But yeah, so Heston in the 60s was taking on roles in dramas where he might not be the main attraction in the film, or he was playing the general, or he was playing a diplomat, or whatever, you know. So he turned to science fiction for, I think it was, he didn't expect much of the Planet of the Apes film. He, at one point, thought it was probably unfilmable. He didn't have much hope for it. It was just another job as an actor. But he took on a role in a science fiction film when there wasn't that much variety around for him. He wasn't getting offered the big roles. He obviously wasn't the main lead material anymore. So he took on this film with very little expectation. But in the role of Taylor, he basically kicked off a franchise that's still going on today. And he basically did something that was completely left field. And it meant that he was able to take on all sorts of different roles after that. He went back to the science fiction well a couple of times with The Omega Man and Soylent Green. But he was able to work in other circles, do other kind of things as well, and basically got his name back out there again. There's obviously one of his later roles was a cameo in Wayne's World, where Wayne is actually, was it Wayne's World 2, where he's asking directions to the church, which is really good because the church is on Gordon Street. He asks for directions to Gordon Street, and he does this. Have you seen the scene where he does it? He goes into a gas station and asks this guy for, you know, I need to get to the church. It's on Gordon Street, and this actor goes, "Oh, Gordon Street, I remember Gordon Street," and all this. And Wayne says, "Look, can we just stop this? You know, I know we don't have a big budget or anything, but you know, can we do better than this guy?" So they wheel the guy off, and they bring in Charlton Heston, and he does the role, and he does it with such gravitas that he makes Wayne cry, and it's just this brilliant. Gordon Street, I remember a girl in Gordon Street, but that was a long time ago. When every time I'm on Gordon Street in Glasgow, it plays in my head, and. And it's an in-joke between me and my son as well, this whole Gordon Street thing. So we talk about this all the time. And anytime I'm in Glasgow, I take a picture of the sign that says Gordon Street, and I say, "I remember it just started." And he goes, "Oh." But yeah, so that basically allowed him to have a whole other career after that. And it was kind of unexpected, but it's completely left field because big name actors weren't doing science fiction. It was seen in the 60s to be this kind of low rent sort of B movie type of thing. So I thought that was a pretty good example
Yeah,
of
I didn't realise
an
that
actor.
actually. I think I've probably not seen maybe enough of his work. I mean, you think your one's obvious. I mean, I'm going right for the most obvious one I could think of for my first one, which would be Liam Neeson, who obviously took on the role in 2008's Taken. So, I mean, Neeson sort of cut his teeth on like your Catherine Cookson sort of adaptations. You know, he was very much a kind of historical drama type of actor. You know, he'd done some stage work with his wife. Is it Natasha Redgrave he was married to? Yeah.
I think so,
Yeah.
yes.
And then he obviously got sort of bigger breaks again, though, in historical drama. So Michael Collins, and obviously the biggie being Schindler's List, which is like what I think most people would probably know him for.
Yep.
And then he fell away for a wee while, came back, did the Star Wars prequels, but you wouldn't necessarily call them action films. No. You know, he was very much embedded in that franchise there. And then again took another sort of career break and came back in Taken. And I feel not only sort of relaunched his career as an action star, but also sort of paved the way for other older actors to take on these kind of action roles. And I'm thinking of sort of like Bob Odenkirk and Nobody, that sort of thing. Whereas I don't really think nobody would have said he was an action star at all. And I get that this film has become sort of much parodied now. You know, obviously the whole big speech about the particular set of skills, and certainly the sequels weren't super. But I feel like it gave everybody the chance to look at him in a different way. But I also feel like Hollywood then went, oh, wait a minute, you know, guys over 60 can actually carry a film, and they can carry an action film and all this sort of thing. So I feel like it kind of changed the model for a lot of, not just his career, but for a lot of films in general.
Yep. Oh, definitely, yes. It's all got to do with the fact that older actors take more care of themselves as well. They work out an awful lot more. That's obviously come through from like the sort of 80s action stars who have actually taken care of themselves. So yes, you're getting people who are more dynamic, because there was something I saw maybe about 6 months ago, and it was a picture of one of the guys from Cocoon from the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a picture of Paul Rudd, and it said, these people are the same age. And it was unbelievable. So they were the same age at the time the pictures were taken, and it's, you know, night and day. They just look completely different. So there is that they can't actually sustain the film. But you're right, it was a complete course change for him. He was known in a very different way, and yeah, and it was a real surprise, and it was a massive hit. You know, you tend to forget that now. Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting is they've actually since pulled together a Taken TV series, but that stars Clive Standen, who was in Vikings, who's significantly younger, playing the role than Neeson was when he took it on. So it's interesting that for the television, they've gone back to the sort of safety of a kind of younger actor. But I don't think, I mean, like, it's not like Oscar bait or anything like that, but I don't think Taken gets enough credit for how it sort of rerouted Hollywood for the subsequent years in terms of the way that actors of a certain age, and I hate saying that, but the way they were actually looked at as viable, you know, box office stars again.
Yeah. Has it been the same for female actors of the same age? There has been, I think there's maybe a couple, but not very many.
Not on the same scale. I feel like, I don't know, because I mean, I remember, this is obviously years ago, I think it was Angelina Jolie said that she hit a certain age and she started just getting offered mum roles, like you can be somebody's mum. And in some cases, she wasn't that much older than the person whose, you know, mother she was playing. And then there's that very good interview with Meryl Streep on Graham Norton where she says she hit 40 and all she got offered was roles as a witch. Yeah. She's like, so if that wants to give you any insight. So I definitely don't think it's been the same for women, but I think that, you know, Taken has sort of changed the way Hollywood's looked at older men.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. My second choice is Michael Keaton, specifically in the film Birdman. Now, Keaton was obviously a very big star in the 80s, going through to the 90s. He was Beetlejuice, he was Batman, and he sustained largely a career from them into the sort of like the 2000s. But the leads after that and the films he was involved in, he wasn't regarded as being a leading actor anymore. He was more of a character actor. It was like, you know, he was in Cars, for instance. He was one of the voices in Cars and all this sort of stuff. And he was doing like small bit parts. And they were all very good, let's face it, you know, but it took the release of the 2014 film, Birdman, to sort of bring him fully back into the consciousness as a leading actor, and a pretty damn good one at that. Now he did go back to the superhero well for this, but in a very different guise, in that he's a washed up. No, not so much washed up. He's still acting. He is in plays, but he is known as being the Birdman, a superhero character from 20 or 30 years before. So it's obviously plays on the whole Batman thing and all that. And his performance in that basically ignited interest in him as a leading actor again. And from that, he's had this pretty fantastic career in that he's gone back. He's obviously been back playing Batman. His last couple of months, he's been Beetlejuice again, and he's been involved in all these projects, like Dope Sick, for instance. He was one of the lead characters in that. And he is a fantastic actor. He has never really changed the way he was doing it, but up until that point, he was like a secondary character in Need for Speed and things like that. So, you know, he was going down that path where it was like sort of diminishing returns. And it took the faith of the director, is it Inarritu? Yeah, to actually say, no, he can actually do this. He can carry this film, because basically he was carrying it. He's pretty much in every scene. Yeah. The camera is with him all the time in this pretend one long continuous shot. So, yeah. It's quite a turnaround for him. And again, that may be part of the Liam Neeson effect as well. The fact that he could do action stuff, but there wasn't really any action stuff within Birdman per se. But later films, he's back playing the Batman as an older character. And obviously in the film we'll never get to see, Batgirl, he's featured in that as well as Bruce Wayne and the Batman. So, you know, it is kind of taking a wee sort of follow on from your first choice, in that there's a bit more faith in bringing some of these older actors back in and doing these roles. So,
yeah. I mean, I think, as you say, it also comes back to just sort of like self-care in a way. Like actors are sort of more conscious of having to sort of maybe keep themselves in better shape or whatever. But I think he's a great choice, because he is, I mean, he is the Batman I remember from being wee as well. And then he did sort of disappear. And then Birdman was just incredible, like a really, really incredible film. So I think he absolutely deserved the sort of career comeback, as it were, because it would be sad to see somebody of his talent, as you say, diminished in Need for Speed.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yep.
My next choice is an excuse to talk about one of my favourite films. So Leslie Nielsen in Airplane from 1980. So before his, I say breakout in sort of, you know, inverted commas, comedy role in Airplane, his bread and butter was TV dramas. So Columbo, Swiss Family Robinson, all those kind of classic, you know, box sets that you'll find somewhere now. And he was in, obviously, dramatic films and in dramatic roles. So you've got, you know, 1956's Forbidden Planet, 1972, The Poseidon Adventure. And then all of a sudden, he has this incredible deadpan delivery as Dr. Rumack in Airplane. And that changed the entire course of his career, because now if you look at Leslie Nielsen, if he pops up in a film, you're expecting a comedy. Because not only did Airplane, you know, do, you know, extremely well and well beloved, but it led to, you know, the Police Squad and then the Naked Gun spin-off films as well, all of which he has this fantastic, you know, way of delivering, like, you know, what's a hospital? It's a building full of sick people, like stuff that's going to stay in your head forever. But it's just a complete 180 on the career that he'd had before. And I think it's so interesting, because I didn't really know him, obviously, as a dramatic actor. I've seen him in, as I say, an episode of Columbo or something like that. But nowadays, if you saw him in a film or he was on a poster, you would expect it to be an out-and-out comedy with his very particular type of, you know, this sort of dry delivery. But yeah, before that, he was, you know, a very serious actor, and he was just given a chance in this role, and it just completely changed everything. But I love this film. It's endlessly quotable, and he is so funny in it.
Yeah, it's one of these movies that you can just watch time and time again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I never tire of watching the Airplane and Naked Gun films.
Yeah.
I just think they're just fantastic it's because he's completely deadpan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works so well. It's difficult to describe just how sort of timeless they are, but just how stupid they are as well, because the jokes are really, really bad. But it's just, it makes you smile, and you can't beat that. You really can't. And it is amazing today. And it is really weird when you're watching like an old episode of Columbo or something like that, and then he pops up in this dramatic, you expect him to fall over the couch or something. Because of the expectation. Obviously, it doesn't happen that way. But yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic choice. Really, really good. Well done.
I think in particular the Poseidon adventure, like you almost kind of expect him to sort of like accidentally unscrew something that shouldn't be done, or just something silly, but he is there in a very dramatic capacity. So yeah, I just think that this, as I say, an excuse to talk about Airplane, because Chris and I still say to each other, I'm being serious and don't call me Shirley. So
yeah, and the Endless, obviously, it's a big building with sick people in it, but that's not important now,
Yeah, so good. So good. But as I say, it just completely changed the way Hollywood looked at him. He suddenly became the funny guy. So yeah, it's great. I think he's just brilliant in that. So anyways, your next choice.
For my final choice, I originally looked to Nick Cage for my final choice, but then when I actually looked at his film career, he's been doing left field films
Everything's quite left
bloody
field.
decades. So it's difficult to pinpoint one. Maybe Mandy, but even then, that was in the midst of sort of like crazy film season for him anyway. So I moved away from that, and I decided on a more classic one, like I'd kind of hinted at with Charlton Heston. I chose Burt Lancaster. Specifically for The Swimmer from 1968. Now, Burt, as well as Charlton, as I like to call them, close personal friends, had their careers during the studio system, 1940s and 50s. Burt Lancaster was slightly different in that he was regarded more as this dramatic leading man rather than the sort of big biblical and sort of sword and sandals epics. So he was in the likes of like From Here to Eternity. He was in quite a few film noirs as well, and that's kind of where he built his name for himself. But then he was in like sort of circus dramas because he was an acrobat. So
that's right.
So he was, and you could tell with the big sort of broad shoulders and everything. So he was obviously very good in that. But again, in the 60s, he was getting offered these similar sort of roles to Charlton Heston, the older man, where he would be more of a supporting character in it rather than the lead. So what he did was he took on this role in a film called The Swimmer. Now, The Swimmer, if you've ever seen it, is not really a conventional movie. He plays a character called Ned, who is part of this sort of middle-class set. It's set in Connecticut, and it's all these sort of well-to-do people who sit around the pool having cocktails, and they've all got their own pools and everything like that. So Ned just sort of appears out of the bushes when this sort of cocktail party is going on, and it starts to like chat to all these people. And then he says, if I sort of worked it right, I could swim all the way home, going through the various swimming pools, which are dotted between here and my house. And his friends are all like, bit weird, and all this, but they just kind of accept it. So, and that's the journey he then takes by going from one place to another, and the people he's meeting, and it kind of unravels his past as it's going along and everything. And it's such a different performance from him. He is the lead character in it, but it's not a kind of stoic, sort of older statesman-like performance. The kind of roles he was getting offered is completely different. Apart from, it's a very 60s film, because you've got to remember around about this time, this is when New Hollywood was starting to take effect. So you were getting the likes of Bonnie and Clyde, and a lot of these new young directors were coming through, challenging the sort of norms of Hollywood cinema. Whereas, like, when you look back on some of these films that were coming out from the studio system, or the tail end of the studio system at the time, they were all rubbish. They were very formulaic. You knew exactly what you were going to get. It was these sort of more left field ones that were more interesting. Now, they weren't wholly successful at the time, but I believe this one was quite successful, and it's sort of held that sort of mystique around it ever since. Only last year there was another 4K release of it. It was a brand new print, was released on Powerhouse Films, and like a lavish box set with all these essays and everything in it as well. So it's regarded as a really good sort of groundbreaking film, and it's basically because you've got the combination of a really sort of weird premise and this big name actor in it, in the place of Burt Lancaster. Now, he obviously went on after that to have a sort of varying middling career. He appeared in quite a lot of stuff after that, but he never really took on a role like that again. I don't know if it burnt him because it wasn't like a massive big success or anything, but I don't know what he was thinking, because he obviously must have looked at the script and said, like, in the first page, Ned appears out of the bushes wearing only a swimming costume. And then it doesn't change. There's no other direction in the film to say, Ned puts on a pair of trousers, because he's only wearing his swimming costume for the whole film. You think, that's a pretty decent, pretty bold choice there. That's pretty good, yeah. Have you seen The Swimmer?
No, you've spoken about it before, and I feel like I want to track it down, because it does sound really, like, unusual. Just even the premise of it, like, he's swimming home, it just sounds bonkers, but it does sound like something that I would actually enjoy. Yeah,
I thought I'd spoken about it before, but I couldn't remember, and I'll really need to go through the pod archive and actually.
Well, no, I think just amongst ourselves. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I might have. I'm not sure, but I think I will go through the pod and write down what we've all been watching stuff, so I won't repeat myself.
It's hard though, because we've just got so much content,
I know, we've just been about for so long. Well, considering most podcasts last less than 10 episodes, so I think we're doing all right.
We're still here, yeah. Yep. So my last choice, I was going to go with Tom Cruise and Collateral, but I actually thought I had spoken about that before, because I do really like that film. So I thought I would go with Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems from 2019. So for me, Adam Sandler's a bit sort of box office Marmite, right? You either buy into his particular style of comedy or you don't. And I think when you think of his films, you're not necessarily going to think of like stress-inducing Oscar bait. You're going to go for like your Little Nickies, your Big Daddies, the Water Boy, all that sort of thing. So I hadn't heard anything about this film and caught it on, I think it was Prime or whatever it was on. And he plays, Howard Ratner, sort of New York City jeweler, and it's the Safdie brothers who directed it. It's a kind of psychological drama. The film itself feels like it came out of nowhere, but actually this role for him particularly feels really, really left field, especially because he's not really done anything similar since. It does feel like a sort of one and done thing, but he's so good in the role. It's a very disorientating film in terms of actual camera work, but also speed of dialogue as well. He's this kind of fast-talking, erratic jeweler who's got debts and debtors sort of closing in on him, and it's quite a violent film, and it's quite sort of like opposing to look at as well, with some of the sort of lighting and choices and stuff like that they've made as well. But he absolutely smashes this role. Like, he has the right amount of energy that this particular film requires, and he's the lead character, and he carries it so effortlessly, to the extent where I remember watching this and just thinking, but why couldn't you do that every time? You've produced an awful lot of pish in your time, but this is just so good. And I think for me, it feels even, as I say, it feels even more left field because he's not done anything else like it. And I don't know if it's because the Safdie brothers have a knack for sort of bringing these performances out of people. I'm thinking of like Robert Pattinson in Good Time as well, which is obviously a great film. But I think that Adam Sandler, like, he's been crucified several times over for films like Jack and Jill and things like that, and his portrayal of women in particular in films, and his sense of humor. But this is just, he is so good. And even just, I'm looking at the poster of it just now, and it's him with the tissue stuffed up his nose, and he just looks so, it's an incredible performance. And you just think, I wonder what was going through the Safdie brothers' mind when they picked him, and I wonder how he managed to pull that out of himself as well. It's a film that gives you a lot of questions about him as an actor, but I just think it's an incredible performance. It's so just out of nowhere.
Well, maybe out of nowhere. I mean, he obviously did Punch Drunk Love, but that was in 2002, and obviously Paul Thomas Anderson saw something in him as well.
That's true, actually,
But he didn't follow that up in any way. I mean, that's what, about 17, 18 years of a gap in between doing these sort of really big dramatic roles. So yes, it's a left field choice for Sandler, and it is for the Safdie brothers as well, because they could have had any number of good dramatic actors in there, but they chose Sandler based on the fact that they've obviously seen him doing stuff. And I think it's nice to see actors stretch themselves in that sort of way, and that's one of the more unusual ones, because, like you say, of the amount of pish he delivers on a regular basis. But it's popular. That's the thing. He obviously gets a lot of enjoyment out of making these, and he obviously gets a lot of money out of making these as well. So there's, it's a difficult thing to argue against, isn't it? And it kind of shows a slight lack of ego as well. If you're prepared to make all these rubbish films just because you know that they work and people actually want to see them, but you know you're going to get, like you say, crucified for them, but then take on these roles which could go horrendously wrong, let's face it. It could be a complete train wreck, but he pulls it off. He works with good people. So nice choice.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk of Oscars and all that sort of thing. I mean, it was really it was so well received. But I think, as you say, it's almost like a risk on both sides. It's a risk because a person who enjoys a typical Adam Sandler film is not going to enjoy Uncut Gems, and it's a risk for the Safdie brothers because, as you say, it could absolutely go tits up, but it didn't. So it's one of these kind of unusual ones where you just think, is that a fluke, or in another few years are you going to pull something else out the bag?
Yeah. Well, I think he probably will. You probably find. I mean, he does do occasional dramatic roles, but they're a lot low key, a lot more low key than Uncut Gems, because, like you say, there was an awful lot of award chatter around that. I think he actually did get a few awards, and there was one they stood up and he basically had to go at the Oscars for not giving him an award. Kind of a funny way. I think there's a clip floating about with that, which is quite funny, and it had the audience in hysterics as well, because it's good. No, excellent choice. Nicely done.
Cool. Well, that's pretty much everything from this particular Moviescramble podcast. If you want to drop John an email that's not selling weird drugs or swords, podcast@moviescramble.co.uk is the address you can find him at. And you can find us on the social channels, Instagram, X, Facebook, the usual, and that's at Moviescramble. But until next time, it is bye from me.
Bye.